This is a quick video going over MLA documentation, the 3 parts of documentation using 8th or 9th edition style. So first off, the first element of documentation is creating the works cited entry. So once you have done some research and found a source you want to put in your essay, you need to create the works cited entry. Works cited entry, of course, goes on the works cited page. The entries will go in alphabetical order, alphabetized by the first word in the entry. You'll have one entry for each source that you use in your essay. In MLA, we only include sources that are cited in the essay, so that are referenced in the essay or used in the essay on the works cited page. The entry format, so what it looks like, and the order that you include information for that source is based on what type of source it is, but a lot of the elements are the same depending or regardless of what kind of source you have. So the typical information that you'll need is an author. You'll look for so a person who has created the source, a title. It's a title immediate to the work. So typically this will be something like an article title or a web page title. A website title, so this would be the overall, MLA calls it a container. It might be a book, it might be a website, it might be whatever it's published in, would be the next kind of title, so a larger work title. A publisher or sponsor, if it's a book, it's obviously going to be publisher. If it's a website, often they'll have a sponsor listed at the bottom next to the copyright. A date of publication, a date of update, or a date that it was released or posted online, and then the URL if you have a web-based source. So here are a couple of examples. I'm using all web sources here because these are the most typical that students will use in their essays. So first off, here I have one where we haven't found very much information. And so sometimes this happens where if you don't have one of those elements, then you're just going to leave it out. So here I have a web page from the FEMA website. The web page itself is just titled Hurricane Ida, and then it's from the FEMA website, and then we don't have a date. FEMA sponsors their own website, so I don't have to repeat FEMA. So then all I do is include the URL at the end. So it looks really simple because I don't have some of those elements. So let me show you what this web page looks like. Here I know that this is the Hurricane Ida web page, and this is the title of the web page. It's the most immediate to the information on the page. And then as you scroll down, you can see there's a lot of stuff that I may be better if I click on the link and then use whatever that page is in my paper. But if I'm just looking for an overview, I might want to use this source. And so we scroll down, you can see FEMA sponsors their own web page. And then we don't have a whole lot else. We don't have any dates. We don't have any people's names. We do know that it's the FEMA website. And so that's it. And you can kind of tell it's the website name because it'll be up near the top. It usually has some kind of special lettering. And then it might also be part of the URL. Now the URL is not the same as the title of the website. So you can use the URL to kind of clue you into what the title of the website ought to be. But it's not FEMA.gov, it's just FEMA. So there's one example. The other example is here where you might have a lot of information. And so in this case, we have actually 3 authors. And so if you have 3 authors, you will list all 3 of them, their full names. The first one is inverted, so last name first and then first name, because we want to alphabetize by the last name. The other 2 can go in the correct order. If you have more than 3 authors, you can do the first author and then et al. Instead of listing all of them. But if you have 2 or 3 authors, you have to actually write them all out. And then we have our title here, again, quotation marks around article titles, and then italics for the website title, and then the date. This is a little mistake here. We've got the hyperlink that got stuck in there, but typically you'll try to remove that, and then so this URL is a little bit longer. Sometimes the URL will be pretty long and take up quite a bit of space. If your entry goes down to the next line, then you'll start to tab them in. So each subsequent line will be tabbed in after the first one. So let me show you what this website looks like. So this is a web article. This is Wall Street Journal. You can see up at the top, we know this is the title of the entire website. Every time you click on any of these other links, Wall Street Journal will be at the top. So that's kind of another way you can tell whether or not you have the actual title of the website. This, of course, is the title of the article itself. And then if you scroll down, you'll see our authors listed. Sometimes the authors are listed after the text of the article, so sometimes you have to kind of look for who might be the one who created it. And then, of course, the date that it was updated. Sometimes it'll be date published, sometimes it'll just be date. And then all of the information that you can read through. And then, of course, at the bottom, you'll be looking for the sponsor and Wall Street Journal as part of the copyright and the sponsorship for this website. So those are the examples that I have for you. So first thing you want to do once you have selected your sources and has decided you want to put them in your essay, go ahead and create that works cited entry on your works cited page, which will be the last page after the text of your essay. Then as you start to work on your essay, you can start to add those sources into your essay. So signal phrases we use, there are two ways to reference a source in your paper, a signal phrase and an in-text citation. A signal phrase we use for direct quotation. So if you're taking words directly from the source and putting quotation marks around them, you need to use a signal phrase with it. This is also called an attributive tag, but our textbook calls them signal phrases. They are also optional for paraphrases, although not necessarily. Often students will use in-text citations for paraphrases instead. And you will always use the first part of the works cited entry as part of the signal phrase. It might not be the whole thing, but it will be part of it. And it does help to transition into the quote. That's why we want to use them for quotes, because if you don't, then that quote's just kind of dropped in there and we don't have any context for it. So the real reason and the important reason to use a signal phrase is to help transition us from whatever you just wrote into the quotation. So here's a couple of examples. Usually signal phrases will follow one of two patterns, either author's name and then a verb, or according to and then whatever the author's name is, or in this case, the title. So we have two different kinds of sources here. And if you remember back to the works cited entries, one of them started with an author's name, Rachel Wolf, and then the other one started with just a title. So whatever you start your works cited entry with is what you will use as your signal phrase. So in this case, we do have to list all three of our authors here because Rachel did not write the article by herself. Now, if we've already referenced them, we could just use last names, but in this case, we're going to spell them out. And then we use a verb, and then we have our quotation in here. Same thing here, but because of this, if we just said according to Hurricane Ida, that might sound kind of funny because we think the hurricane's talking to us. So it's sometimes better to add in a little more information like the FEMA webpage, and then we include the quote like that. So those are two options, but the according to phrase is very common for signal phrases. The second way to reference a source in your paper is to use what's called an in-text citation. You may also have heard these called inline references or parenthetical citations because they're in parentheses. So we do use them often for paraphrases. You can also use a signal phrase. It's up to you, but if you just want a quick little reference to a source because maybe you use some statistics or something in that sentence, then using that parentheses at the end of the sentence is a really easy way to add in a reference. You always use the first part of the works cited entry for this. So I'll show you a couple of examples. Remember, a paraphrase is when you take information and you rewrite it in your own words. And so I've just taken that quote that I had about generators from the web page, and I just rewrote it in a shorter way in my own words. And then at the end of the sentence, I will include in parentheses the first part of the works cited entry, which happens to be the article title or the web page title. And I do include the quotation marks around it because I want the reader to understand that this is a title and I'm not just putting the name of the hurricane at the end of the sentence. So just keep that in mind. If something has a title, it will be formatted the same way every time you write it, regardless of where you write it at. Same thing with our other source here. Just paraphrasing that same quote that I had, just making it a little bit shorter and putting it in my own words. And then because it is just an in-text citation, I only have to include last names. So it's a quick reference to the authors of the source, really easy to match with the source on the works cited page, which is the most important thing, is that we can easily find the source on the works cited page. So that was just a quick little overview of the 3 parts of MLA documentation.